It was 5:42 a.m. on the number 17 bus in Harborview. I was clutching my empty backpack, my account just drained. The old man beside me quietly slid over a new monthly pass. "Don't let them make you their story," he whispered. I scoffed, thinking it was just stranger's pity. 3 weeks later, I knew exactly who he was and why my family looked terrified when he walked into that courtroom. My name is Brooklyn Cox. The first notification chimed at 5:32 in the morning, a thin digital sound that sliced through the pre-dawn quiet of my apartment. My phone screen lit up the darkness. Harbor Federal transaction approved, $312.77. I frowned, my mind thick with sleep. Maybe it was the automated payment for the studio insurance, but that was not due for 2 weeks, and it was never that exact amount. Before I could clear the alert, another one buzzed. Transaction approved, $94.12. Then another, and another. They came in a rapid cascade, a digital hailstorm of approvals, one after the other, 13 of them in total, each one a hammer blow against the thin wall of my financial security. I sat bolt upright, the blankets pooling around my waist, and fumbled for the banking app icon. My thumbprint barely registered before the screen refreshed. Savings account studio fund. Current balance, $4.18. I stared. The numbers did not compute. The world tilted slightly. That account had held over $12,000, saved over 4 years. Penny by agonizing penny, every double-booked weekend, every commercial shoot I hated, every late night spent archiving public records for side money. It was all there for the lease deposit on the Pier Quarter studio. It was gone. My hands were shaking so badly I had to dial the bank's 24-hour line 3 times. When a voice finally answered, automated and offensively cheerful, I just started yelling, "Fraud! Fraud! My account is empty!" I was transferred to a live agent, a man named Marcus, whose voice was coded in a thick, bored detachment. I read him the transactions, my own voice cracking. "Ma'am, let me review the activity." He sighed, the sound of typing clicking in the background. A long, agonizing pause. "Okay, I am seeing these charges. They all appear to be card-present transactions." "What does that mean?" "I am in my bed. My card is in my wallet." "It means the physical card was swiped, ma'am, at multiple locations, a high-end electronics store, a jeweler, a day spa." "That is impossible. I was asleep. You have to reverse them." Another pause, more clicking. "Ma'am, I am also seeing that the correct PIN was entered for every single transaction, including the cash withdrawal of $2,000 at the ATM on 5th Street. "No," I whispered. "That cannot be right." "I did not give anyone my PIN." "The system shows these are valid," he said, his tone hardening, shifting from boredom to suspicion. "And, looking at the account history, I see a note from 6 months ago. You called to authorize a secondary user, an Elaine Cox, to make a specific withdrawal." "That was my mother," I said, my stomach turning to ice. "That was one time. For a medical bill. It was an emergency." "I understand, ma'am. But that establishes a history of authorization. The bank sees a card being used in person, with the correct PIN, by a user who has previously been granted access. From our perspective, this does not meet the criteria for fraud. This appears to be a civil dispute." "A civil dispute. She stole $12,000. You will have to resolve this with the authorized user, Ms. Cox. We cannot reverse these charges at this time. You can file a police report, but without clear evidence of forced theft, the bank's hands are tied." The line clicked dead. I was left in the ringing silence of my apartment, the gray light of morning starting to seep through the blinds. I threw the covers off and ran to the kitchen counter where I had left my purse. I ripped it open, dumping the contents onto the floor: keys, loose change, lenses caps, old receipts, no wallet. I found the wallet kicked under the sofa. I unzipped it. The slot where my Harbor Federal debit card lived was empty. The memory hit me, sharp and sickening. My mother, Elaine, standing in this same kitchen last week. She had been distraught, dabbing at her eyes. It was the utility bill. She said, "A mix-up. They were going to shut off the power. Could she just borrow my card to pay it online? Just this once, she would give it right back." I had given it to her. I had typed the number into the utility website myself, and then she had gotten a call. Her ride was here. She had rushed out, promising to bring the card back tomorrow. I had texted her 4 times. "Mom, I need my card back." "Oh, honey, I am so sorry. It completely slipped my mind. I will drop it off Friday." "Mom, seriously, the studio deposit." "You worry too much. Brooklyn, it is safe right here in my purse. Stop nagging." I looked at the phone screen. At the $4.18, I felt the floor drop out from under me. I moved on autopilot. I logged into my computer. My movements jerky and robotic. I printed every transaction. The 14 hits that had bled my future dry. The ink was still warm on the paper as I snatched them from the printer tray. I grabbed my camera bag, a reflex. My camera was my only other asset. The one thing that made me money. The one thing that was mine. I did not shower. I pulled on yesterday's jeans and a sweatshirt, stuffed the printed statements into my bag, and walked out into the cold Harborview morning. I got on the number 17 bus at 5:42, the one I used to take before I could afford a car. The one that snaked from the city center out to the sprawling, identical suburbs where my parents lived. The bus was mostly empty, smelling of stale coffee and diesel. I sat down heavily, clutching the strap of my camera bag so tightly my knuckles were white. That is when the old man sat next to me. He was clean but worn, wearing an old wool coat that had pilled across the shoulders. He must have seen the look on my face, or the printed bank statements clutched in my hand. He did not ask what was wrong. He just stared straight ahead and said, his voice a low, warm rumble, "Keep your receipts." I turned, startled. "Whatever it is," he said, still not looking at me. "Do not argue. Document. Keep the paper. People get loud. Paper stays quiet. Paper wins." I must have looked at him like he was crazy. I just nodded, a jerky, dismissive motion, and turned back to the window. All I could think about was the deposit for the Pier Quarter studio, 2,500 square feet of exposed brick and north-facing windows. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, had given me until the end of the week. He had 2 other offers. I had promised him the certified check by tomorrow. That dream was now gone, evaporated, stolen by a day spa and a jewelry store. The bus ride felt like an eternity. When I finally got off, the sun was up, casting a weak light on the manicured lawns of my parents' neighborhood. Their house looked exactly as it always did. Humble, neat, a picture of modest, middle-class piety. I used my old key. The house was quiet. "Mom, Dad?" "In the dining room. Honey." My mother's voice trilled. "We are just finishing breakfast." I walked in and stopped cold. The table was set, not with the everyday chipped Corelle, but with new glittering crystal glasses, the kind I had seen in department stores for hundreds of dollars. In the center of the table was an open bottle of wine, a deep red, with a label I recognized from a shoot I had done for a luxury magazine. It retailed for over $100. My father, Greg, was sipping from one of the new glasses, reading a pamphlet. Brooklyn, what a surprise. My mother, Elaine, beamed, bustling up to hug me. She was wearing a new silk robe. She smelled of expensive perfume, the kind she always borrowed from me when I visited. "You are just in time. Greg was just telling me all about the plans for the mission trip." "Mission trip?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes, to San Paloma," Greg said, not looking up from his pamphlet. He sounded self-important, pastoral. "A real opportunity to serve. We are leading a delegation." I could not speak. The smell of the wine, the glitter of the crystal, the casual mention of an international trip, my $12,000, my studio, my future, it was all sitting on their dining room table. "I need to use the bathroom," I muttered, and walked past them down the hall. Her purse was on the hall table, a new one, leather. I did not even hesitate. I plunged my hand inside, past the wallet, past the keys, and my fingers brushed against the familiar plastic rectangle. I pulled it out, my debit card. Tucked right beside it was a folded receipt. From Harborview Fine Timepieces, one men's chronograph watch, total $4,180. I walked back into the dining room. I placed the card on the table, then I placed the receipt directly on top of it. Elaine's smile froze, then melted into a look of practiced confusion. Oh, goodness, I completely forgot I still had that. I meant to pay that bill and… You bought a watch, I said. My voice did not sound like my own. It was a low, dead thing. You bought a $4,000 watch, and crystal glasses, and wine, and you went to a spa, and you drained my entire savings account. Elaine's face crumpled. The tears came instantly, a performance I had seen 1,000 times. Oh, Brooklyn, you do not understand. We borrowed it, just borrowed it. Your father? He needed something respectable for the ministry trip, to make a good impression for the donors. Borrowed it. I looked at Greg. He was finally looking at me, his eyes cold. You should be more understanding. Brooklyn, he said, his voice smooth and authoritative. We are your family. We needed it. You have a good job. You can make more. This is for the Lord's work. The Lord's work, a $4,000 watch. The volume was rising in my throat, a hysterical bubble. That was my studio deposit. That was 4 years of my life. You stole from me. I grabbed my phone. I am calling the police. I am reporting this as theft. Greg's expression did not change, but a new, dangerous edge entered his voice. He leaned forward. You do that. You call them. And then we will make some calls of our own. What are you talking about? Your clients, he said, almost casually. That big one. Oak Fable. Is it? We will just have to let them know. Let them know our daughter is having a mental health crisis, that she is unstable, accusing her own loving parents of terrible things. How do you think that will look for your reputation? Do you think they want an unstable person handling their brand? I stopped. The phone felt heavy in my hand. He saw the hesitation. He smiled. We are your family, Brooklyn. We look out for each other. You would not want to damage the family name, would you? Which is also your name. The blackmail was so simple, so effective. It sucked the air from my lungs. He was threatening my career, my name, the only thing I had left. Give me my card, I whispered. Elaine pushed it across the table, her tears already drying. See, no harm done. It is all a misunderstanding. I spent that night on their sofa, the one that smelled like dust and secrets. I could not drive back. I could not face my own empty apartment. I lay there in the dark, clutching my camera bag to my chest like a shield. The fear that settled over me was colder and heavier than just the loss of the money. That was gone. I knew I would never see it again. This was something new. It was the realization that my parents saw my success not as something to be proud of, but as a resource to be plundered, and they would burn my entire life to the ground to cover their tracks. The money was just the start. My professional reputation, my very name, was cracking, and they were the ones holding the hammer. I left their house before the sun was fully up, clutching my now useless debit card. The first stop was not my apartment, but the Harborview Police Precinct on 4th Street. I felt naive, almost childish, but I had to follow the protocol the bank agent had mentioned. I had to have the paper. I sat for an hour on a hard plastic bench, the smell of stale coffee and floor wax filling the air, before a tired officer with a permanently skeptical expression called my name. I laid it all out in the quiet interview room, the 14 transactions, the withdrawal, the $12,000, the watch receipt, the threat against my clients. He typed slowly, one finger at a time. So, let me get this straight. You are accusing your mother, Elaine Cox, of using your debit card. She stole it, I clarified, my voice tight. She drained my account and my father threatened me when I confronted them. But you have let her use this card in the past. Once, 6 months ago, for a specific utility bill, I authorized a single payment. He sighed, a long, weary sound, and leaned back in his chair, the springs groaning. Ma'am, this is a family dispute. It is a civil matter. It sounds like you lent her the card, and now you regret it. I did not lend it. She kept it under false pretenses. That is theft, and the credit card fraud. He held up a hand. We cannot prove who entered the PIN. You admit she had prior access. We cannot arrest your mother because you two are arguing over money. He handed me a slip of paper with a reference number. I knew, just by looking at the coding on the printout, what it was. It was not a criminal case file. It was a domestic incident report, destined for a digital folder no one would ever open. It was, in the eyes of the law, meaningless. My next call was back to Harbor Federal. I fought my way through the automated system, escalated to a supervisor in the fraud department, and gave her the police report number. Her response was cold and immediate. Ms. Cox, I have reviewed the file. As the initial agent informed you, the transactions were all card present. The correct PIN was entered on all attempts. Furthermore, your account history shows a documented instance of prior authorization for the very individual you are now accusing. That was one time, for one bill, I pleaded, desperation rising in my throat. This is $12,000. This is different. The bank is not in a position to mediate family financial arrangements. Ma'am, as far as our security system is concerned, these are valid charges. We will not be issuing a provisional credit, and we will not be reversing the transactions. We now consider this matter closed. The line clicked. The two institutional doors, law enforcement and the bank, had slammed shut in my face. I was alone. The dread had settled into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. The way my father threatened me, it was too practiced, too easy. He knew exactly which levers to pull. It made me think, what else had they done? I went home to my small apartment, locked the deadbolt, and sat down at my computer. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to be methodical. I logged into my credit monitoring service. The world stopped. It was not just the savings account. 2 new credit cards, one from a national bank with a $5,000 limit, one from a department store with a $10,000 limit. Both opened 3 weeks ago, both maxed out. Electronics, clothing, airline tickets, and one personal loan, $20,000, issued by an online lender I had never heard of. Bayline Capital, funded just 8 days ago. My score, which I had painstakingly built to the high 700s, was now listed as 545. It had fallen more than 200 points in less than a month. I was toxic. They had not just emptied my present, they had stolen my future. They had used my social security number, my good name, and leveraged my entire life for $35,000 in debt I never saw. The phone rang, and the caller ID read, Pier Quarter Holdings. It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord for the studio space. Brooklyn, good morning, he said, his voice cheerful. Just calling to confirm you are dropping off the deposit check by noon tomorrow. I have got 2 other parties very interested, but you know I want you in that space. I leaned my head against the drywall. The paint felt cool. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice hollow. There has been a significant financial emergency. Fraud. I do not have the deposit. There was a long silence. Oh, he said. His voice lost its warmth. Well, Brooklyn, I am sorry to hear that. Truly. But I am running a business. I cannot hold the space for you on a maybe. I will give you 7 days. That is the absolute best I can do. End of business next Friday, or I have to give it to the next person in line. 7 days. I needed a miracle. I hung up and immediately called Anchor Street Credit, the local union that was handling my small business loan for the studio equipment. I spoke to Janine, my loan officer. Brooklyn, I was just about to call you, she said, and her voice was strained. We ran the final credit check this morning to draw up the papers. Your file. It completely collapsed. Your score dropped over 200 points, and it is showing $35,000 in new unsecured debt. We cannot approve the loan. The file is suspended, effective immediately. I tried to explain. That is the fraud I am talking about. It was not me. I am filing reports. I can fix this. I believe you, Brooklyn. I really do, she said. And she sounded genuine. But the numbers are the numbers. The underwriters will not sign off until you can get that debt proven as fraudulent and removed from your report. My hands are tied, and you and I both know that takes months, not days. The studio was gone. The entire 4-year dream dissolved in a single morning of bureaucratic indifference. Panic was making my vision swim. I had a deadline. Oak Fable, my biggest retainer client, was expecting a batch of retouched product shots for their new catalog. I grabbed my hard drive, located the folder, zipped the files, and sent the email. 10 minutes later, my contact there, Mark, emailed back. Brooklyn, you sent us the raw files from the 2023 winter shoot. We need the retouched finals for the spring line. The deadline was noon. Is everything okay? I stared at the screen. I had sent the wrong folder. A stupid, amateur mistake. I fumbled for the drive, found the correct files, and sent them, my apology sounding weak and desperate even to me. He replied almost instantly, "No problem. We have them. But listen, let us schedule a call for next week to discuss the upcoming summer shoot. We might need to adjust the schedule." Adjust the schedule, the corporate code for "we are nervous." My father's threat was already becoming real. Without him even having to make the call, my own stress was doing the work for him. I was drowning. I needed to know if I was the only one. I called my younger cousin, Dylan. He was 22, just starting his first graphic design job. "Hey, D. Weird question," I started, trying to sound casual. "Did Aunt Elaine ever ask you for money?" There was a long silence on the line, then a heavy sigh. "Why, what did she do to you?" "How much?" Dylan. $6,000, he muttered, the shame evident in his voice. "It was last year. She said Uncle Greg had a heart scare. They needed it for the hospital deductible, and they would pay me back in full when their CD matured. I emptied my savings." "You never got it back," I stated. It was not a question. "No. When I asked about it 3 months later, she started to cry. She told my mom I was stressing her out, that I was being ungrateful for all the times she had babysat me as a kid. My own mom got mad at me. I let it go. It was easier than fighting the whole family." Ungrateful. The word hit me like a stone. I hung up and dialed my sister, Riley. We had not spoken in 2 years, not since her wedding. She lived in Portland, and she had cut our parents off entirely. I had always thought she was being dramatic, cold. Now, I wondered. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Brooklyn?" Her voice was filled with caution. "Riley, I know this is out of the blue, but I need to ask you about Mom and Dad." I told her everything. The empty account, the credit cards, the loan, Dylan. She did not sound surprised. She just sounded profoundly tired. $9,400, she said, her voice flat. "What?" "That is what they took from me, 2 weeks before the wedding. It was the money for the caterer. Mom offered to hold on to it for safekeeping, said she would pay the vendor directly. Instead, they took what she called a pre-anniversary trip to Hawaii. When I confronted them, they told the entire family I was having a bridal meltdown, that I was unstable and making things up. They almost ruined my wedding." Unstable. The pattern was suddenly, sickeningly clear. It was a script. They targeted a family member. They isolated you. Waited for a moment of vulnerability, a new job, a wedding, a new studio. They manufactured a crisis, took the money, and if you dared to fight back, they deployed the character assassination. Ungrateful, unstable, mentally ill. They controlled the narrative by painting the victim as the perpetrator. I was not unstable. I was not ungrateful. I was furious. The photographer in me, the professional archivist, took over. The part of my brain that knew how to organize chaos, how to find the signal in the noise. I opened a new Excel spreadsheet. I saved the file to a new, encrypted hard drive. I named it Case BC. I dumped my camera bag on the floor. I took out my Canon. I photographed my empty wallet. I photographed the receipt for the $4,000 watch. I photographed my computer screen showing the credit report, the $35,000 in fraudulent debt. I scanned the meaningless police report. I scanned the bank's denial letter. I started a timeline, a new tab in the spreadsheet, date, time, amount, action, evidence. I left my apartment and walked to a bodega on the corner. I bought a cheap, prepaid phone and a $50 top-up card. I went back to my apartment and spent the next 3 hours methodically changing every password I had, every bank account, every email, every social media profile, every client portal. I routed all two-factor authentication codes to the new, cheap phone. I turned my real smartphone off and put it in a drawer. It felt compromised. I went online and placed a full freeze on my credit with all 3 bureaus. It was too late for the $35,000, but they would not be able to open a single new line of credit in my name. I felt a small, cold sliver of control returning. I was documenting. I was building walls. I worked until after midnight. The glow of the monitor the only light in the room. Exhausted. I finally crawled into bed. At 3 a.m, a sound woke me, a sharp hiss from outside my window, followed by the slap of footsteps running on the pavement. I ran to the window and looked down at the street. My car was parked under a streetlight. A figure in a dark hoodie was sprinting around the corner at the end of the block, and on my windshield, dripping in the sickly yellow light, was a single word spray-painted in thick, running red letters. Liar. I stood there, my hand over my mouth, the cheap prepaid phone clutched in my other hand. They were not just defending. They were attacking. They knew where I lived. They had moved from financial threats and character assassination to physical intimidation. The message was clear. Shut up, or else. The red paint on my windshield was still tacky when the next blow landed. I was scrubbing the glass with turpentine at 7 a.m, the fumes making my eyes water. When a uniformed sheriff's deputy pulled up to the curb, he did not ask about the vandalism. He got out of his car, holding a manila envelope. Brooklyn Cox. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse from the chemicals. He handed me the envelope. You have been served. I ripped it open. Right there on the sidewalk. It was a temporary restraining order, an emergency order for protection from harassment, filed by Greg and Elaine Cox. Against me, I was legally ordered to stay 100 yards away from my parents, their home, and their church. I was forbidden from contacting them, their associates, or their friends. The hearing was set for 30 days from now. I scanned the attached affidavit, my mother's flowery handwriting filling the page, alleging I had become unstable and violent. She claimed I had stormed into their home, screaming, and that they were in fear for their physical safety. She mentioned my erratic behavior and delusional accusations. They had used my own police report against me. The vandalism, the liar painted on my car, was the punctuation mark. They had created the crisis, then called the law to frame me as the aggressor. I was legally silenced. The campaign did not stop there. It went digital. The first email I received was not from a client, but from my Aunt Moira. It was a forward. The subject line, written by my mother, was Prayers for Brooklyn. I opened it. It was a mass email, sent to what looked like their entire contact list family, friends, church members, and I horrifyingly realized, people I knew professionally, people whose email addresses she must have scraped from my old computer or my holiday card lists. Dear friends, it began. It is with the heaviest heart that Greg and I must share a painful update. Our beloved daughter, Brooklyn, is suffering from a severe mental health crisis. She is paranoid, deeply unwell, and has become obsessed with a delusion that we have stolen money from her. We are heartbroken and terrified. She has been lashing out, and we have had to get the authorities involved for our own safety. Please, do not engage with her if she contacts you with these wild stories. She is not herself. We ask only for your prayers as we try to get her the help she desperately needs." It was a masterpiece of social assassination. In one single email, I was cast as the crazy, dangerous daughter. They were the suffering, pious victims. They had preemptively poisoned every well I could possibly turn to. The fallout was immediate. My phone, the real one I had turned back on, lit up. The first call was from Oak Fable. Mark's voice was different this time. Clinical. Distant. "Brooklyn, after our last conversation, and in light of some concerning information we have received, we feel it is best to pause our summer contract. We are going to handle the upcoming shoot in-house." Pause. The corporate word for fired. An hour later, 2 more clients canceled. One was a local restaurant group, the other a real estate agency. Both cited schedule changes. Both had been on my mother's email list. The studio was gone. My retainer clients were gone. My reputation was in flames. The final piece of paper arrived that afternoon. It was taped to my apartment door. A bright orange notice to pay or quit. With my accounts drained and my income severed, I had missed the first of the month rent payment. The eviction process had begun. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the smell of turpentine, the restraining order, the cancellation emails, and the eviction notice. I had $4.18. I had $35,000 in fraudulent debt. My parents had executed a perfect, scorched earth campaign. I was broke, discredited, and about to be homeless. I made one call, the only one I had left. "Ava, it is me. They won. I have nothing left." Ava Morales has been my best friend since college. She is a data marketer, a person who lives and breathes spreadsheets, pivot tables, and demographic analysis. She does not panic. She optimizes. She was at my door in 15 minutes. She did not hug me. She did not offer platitudes. She just looked at the restraining order, the eviction notice, and the red smear still on my car window. "Pack a bag," she said. "We are going to my place, and bring that new hard drive you told me about." Ava's apartment in North Harbor was a clean, minimalist space overlooking the water. It smelled like white tea and electronics. As soon as I dropped my bag in her living room, she handed me a beer, sat me on her sofa, and opened her laptop. "Okay, you are done talking. You are done reacting. They want you to be emotional. They want you to be hysterical. That is how they win. We are not going to be hysterical. We are going to be factual." She turned the laptop toward me. "You are a commercial photographer. You are an archivist. Your job is to document reality. So let us document." She looked at me, her eyes sharp. "Collect. Do not argue. Do not engage. Do not email them. Do not call them. Every time you feel the urge to scream, you scan a receipt instead. We are not building a case for a family argument. We are building a financial map. Where did the money start? And where did it go? We need a ledger." "A ledger." "Recovery ledger," I said, the name tasting strange and bitter in my mouth. "Good." Ava's fingers flew across the keyboard. She created a new, secure, invitation-only online group. "Who else? You mentioned Dylan. You mentioned Riley." I invited them. Riley joined within 30 minutes. Dylan, 10 minutes later. Then I thought about the email. My mother had made a mistake. By sending that mass email, she had given me a list of her contacts, a list of potential victims. I started with Aunt Moira, the one who had forwarded me the email. She was my mother's older sister, a widow who lived quietly. I sent her a private invitation to the group. She called me almost immediately, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "Brooklyn, that group you invited me to, Recovery Ledger, is this about Elaine?" "Yes, Aunt Moira. It is. Oh, Lord." She was crying, but it was not the performative sobbing of my mother. It was the dry, exhausted crying of someone who had been silent for too long. She told me I was paranoid, She told the whole family I was grieving badly and losing my mind. What did she do? Moira. It was $14,000. Brooklyn, she whispered, as if saying it aloud was a betrayal. It was Don's funeral fund, the money I had set aside for his marker and the plot. Elaine offered to invest it for me, said she could get a better return in some special church fund. When I asked for it back for the stonemason, she said it was tied up. Then she told everyone I was confused, that Don's death had made me imagine things. Paranoid, confused, the same script. I added Moira's story to the spreadsheet. Case BC was growing. Ava was in her element. This is not just family. This is organized. Who else was on that email? The church. The email list had included several members of my parents' congregation. Harborview Community Chapel. I scanned the names. 2 of them were elderly, in their 80s, Mr. and Mrs. Gable. I did not know them well, but I knew they were devout. I sent them a carefully worded, neutral email from a new, anonymous account, asking if they had ever had concerns about the mission fund my parents managed. Mr. Gable replied within the hour. His response was polite, confused, and deeply troubled. We are very concerned, yes. We have given a significant amount to the San Paloma Mission Fund, run by Greg and Elaine Cox, but we have been asking for months for the itemized receipts for our tax donations. Elaine keeps promising them, but they never arrive. The numbers she gives us verbally do not seem to match our bank statements. We are on a fixed income, and this is very worrying. They were skimming from the elderly, from their own church. The final piece that day came from my Uncle Conrad, my father's brother. He had been on the email list, and he replied to the group invitation with a single phone call. Brooklyn, he said, his voice a low growl. I knew this day would come. I have been waiting 15 years for this. What do you mean? Uncle Conrad. Your father. Greg, he did it to his own mother, my mother, your grandmother Evelyn. I sat down. I knew Grandma Evelyn was in a nursing home, but Greg managed all her affairs. About 10 years ago, Conrad said, I went to visit Mom. She was still lucid then. She was upset because Greg had brought her some routine bank papers to sign. I looked at them after he left. It was not routine. It was a durable power of attorney, giving him total control of her entire estate, effective immediately, not just upon her incapacitation. He had tried to slip it in with a stack of insurance forms. I caught it. I called him out. He backed off, said it was a misunderstanding from the lawyer, but I saw his signature. Brooklyn. He had already signed the witness line, trying to get her to sign the other. He forged a signature on a power of attorney. He tried. I stopped him, but it makes me wonder what else he did that I did not catch. I have not trusted him with $1 since. Ava was at her whiteboard, drawing lines, connecting names. Elaine, Greg, Dylan, Riley, Moira, the Gables, Conrad. She started adding the numbers. My $12,000, my $35,000 in fraudulent debt, Dylan's $6,000, Riley's $9,400, Moira's $14,000, the Gables' significant donations, which we estimated at least $10,000 a year for the last 5 years, and that was just what we knew. Ava did the math. This is over $180,000, Brooklyn, and that is a conservative estimate, based on just what we can prove in an hour of calls. This has been happening for at least 10 years. The scale of it was staggering. It was not just impulse, not just desperation. It was a long con, a systematic draining of every person who trusted them. I finally understood. My father, Greg, was the calculator. He was the one who understood power of attorney, who knew how to open credit lines, who orchestrated the legal and financial architecture. My mother, Elaine, was the face. She was the damsel in distress, the tearful, loving, confused victim, deployed to handle the emotional manipulation and the social cleanup. They were a team. That night, I could not sleep. I was on Ava's sofa, the city lights of North Harbor glittering outside. My Case BC file was open, the spreadsheet glowing in the dark. My cheap prepaid phone, the one I had set up just for security, vibrated on the table. It was not a call or a text. It was a push alert from a service I had set up earlier that day. On a hunch, I had created a public records monitoring alert tied to my parents' names and their known email addresses. It was designed to catch any new public filings, business registrations, or, in this case, new data breaches. This alert was different. It was from a service that monitors international financial registrations. The alert read, "New account registration detected. Cox, affiliated email, Greg's primary email, Institution Bice International Bank, Bice, a tiny, notorious island nation in the Caribbean, a place with no extradition treaties, a place where people went to make money disappear. They were not just stealing. They were planning to run." The notification from the monitor alert sat on the cheap phone screen, glowing in the dark of Ava's living room. Bice International Bank. It was not just a name. It was a strategy. Bice was a black hole for money, a place with banking secrecy laws that made the Cayman Islands look transparent. It was a one-way destination. This was not a debt spree. This was not a scramble to cover expenses. This was an exit plan. If they were planning an exit, they would be liquidating every asset they could touch. My mind immediately went to my Uncle Conrad's warning. He tried to get her to sign a power of attorney. I stopped him. My grandmother, Evelyn Keaton. The restraining order was a complication. It explicitly forbade me from contacting my parents or their associates. But Evelyn was my blood. She was not an associate. She was a target. I drove Ava's car to Rosemar Court, the assisted living facility where my father had installed her 5 years ago. I was willing to risk the contempt charge. I found her in the communal sunroom, watching a game show with the volume muted. She was frail, her hands translucent over the arms of her wheelchair, but her eyes were exactly as I remembered them, sharp, intelligent, and deeply tired. "Brooklyn," she whispered, her face lighting up before a cloud of worry passed over it. "You should not be here, Greg." He was very clear. "He said you were unwell." "I am not unwell, Grandma," I said, kneeling beside her chair. "I am in trouble, and I think you are, too." I laid out the abbreviated version, the stolen savings, the fraudulent loans, the Bice account. She did not look surprised. She just looked sad. She reached out and touched my cheek. "He was never right. Your father," she said, her voice thin as paper. "Not since he was a boy." "What do you mean?" "It was 1981, she said, looking past me at the silent television. "Greg was 22. He had gambling debts, bad ones. His father, my husband, had to bail him out. We thought that was the end of it. Then, after my husband passed, I found the letter. Greg had gone to his own grandfather, my father-in-law, and borrowed nearly all of his retirement savings to cover a different debt. He promised to pay it back. He never did. The old man died with nothing, Greg. He called it borrowing then, too. Some words never change. The pattern, it was lifelong, a predator who had been honing his craft for decades. And Elaine, Evelyn continued, her gaze hardening. She is the other side of the coin. She called me back in 2014, weeping, hysterical, said they had been foolish. They had remortgaged the house to Greg's ministry, and the bank was foreclosing. She begged me. I sent them $5,000. It was all I could spare from my pension. The house was never foreclosed on. Was it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Evelyn shook her head. No. And 2 weeks later, your sister Riley, before the big fight, she posted a photo, your parents, on a cruise, to Alaska. When I asked Elaine about it, she said the cruise was a blessing from the Lord, that a donor had paid for, and that my $5,000 had saved their home. She can lie and cry at the same time. It is a talent. The air in the room felt cold. Grandma, I said, my voice dropping. Was he here recently with papers? Her eyes widened in fear. It was the answer. Yes, she whispered, her hand tightening on the arm of the chair. Last week. He said he was just updating his will, and since he was my power of attorney for health, he needed me to sign an update to my will, just to make things simpler for the estate, to make sure everything was aligned. Did you sign it? No. I told him I wanted my lawyer to see it first. He got so angry. Brooklyn, his face changed. He told me I was being difficult, that I was confused. He scared me. He said he would be back. Where are the papers? Grandma? She pulled them from the drawer of her side table, a thick sheaf of legal documents. I laid them out on the floor of the sunroom and, using my professional camera, I took high-resolution photographs of every single page, every clause, every signature line. I drove back to Ava's apartment feeling like I had swallowed ice. I immediately sent the image files to an independent lawyer Riley had used in Portland, someone with no ties to Harborview. He called me back within an hour. His voice was grim. Ms. Cox, I am looking at these documents. This is not an update. This is a complete financial coup. This document attempts to transfer 90% of your grandmother's assets, including her home and her investment portfolio, into a new, irrevocable trust. The sole trustees and beneficiaries of that trust, Gregory Cox and Elaine Cox. What about the grandkids? I asked. You are all explicitly disinherited. You, your sister, any other grandchildren. It is a blatant attempt to seize her entire estate and legally wall it off from the rest of the family. This is not estate planning. This is elder financial abuse, plain and simple, and it is highly illegal. I hung up the phone. The pattern was no longer about borrowing. It had escalated. My $12,000 savings account, the $35,000 in credit card debt, that was just the seed money. That was the dry run. The real target was my grandmother's entire life savings. When I got back to Ava's, she had cleared the entire living room wall. We are going analog, she declared, handing me a stack of pushpins. Digital is too easy to delete, and we have too many data points. We are building a physical map, a proper war room. For the next 8 hours, we worked. I printed everything, the bank statements from the 14 fraudulent transactions, the receipt for the $4,000 watch, the photo of my vandalized windshield, the email from my mother calling me unstable, the credit reports, the timeline of Dylan's loan and Riley's wedding money, the crying affidavit from Aunt Moira, and now, the high-resolution photos of Evelyn's fraudulent will. The recovery ledger group had quietly grown. 2 more cousins and a former neighbor of my parents had joined, each with a story of a loan or a donation that was never repaid. We were now at 11 victims. The provable, documented amount stolen was climbing well past $200,000, not even counting my grandmother's estate. Ava, meanwhile, was buried in her laptop, running data queries on public records. I found the drain, she said, her voice tight with focus. The money from the Gables, the elderly couple from the church, their donations. They were never deposited into the Harborview Community Chapel's main account. Where did they go? They were funneled into a separate entity, an LLC. I found 2, both registered to my parents' home address. She wrote the names on 2 large index cards and pinned them to the center of the wall, Cedar Pike LLC. Blue Heron Missions. Blue Heron Missions is the front, Ava explained, tapping her screen. It is registered as a nonprofit organization. This is the ministry. This is where the cash donations from people like the Gables and Moira go. It is a black hole, no receipts, just faith. They take in cash and untraceable checks. And Cedar Pike? I asked, looking at the sterile, corporate-sounding name. That is the washing machine, Ava said. Blue Heron donates its funds to Cedar Pike for logistical support and consulting services, and Cedar Pike is the entity that pays the bills, the lease on their new car, the $4,000 watch, which I guarantee was billed as mission supplies, the spa days, the luxury goods. How do they justify it? They are printing their own invoices, Ava said, her voice dripping with disgust. Blue Heron pays Cedar Pike for travel coordination or donor outreach, and the invoices are self-generated. It is a closed loop. Money in as charity, money out as business expenses. They are laundering the donations. She saved her biggest discovery for last. Because they are LLCs. They have to file taxes. I ran a public data query on their tax filings. Here is the kill shot. Brooklyn. She printed a single page. It was a summary of their Schedule C filing. Both LLCs combined, she said, declared a total taxable income last year of $22,000. I looked at the wall, the $4,000 watch, the new crystal, the plans for an international trip to San Paloma, the BICE bank account. They are committing massive, blatant tax fraud, I whispered. Yes, Ava said, stepping back from the wall. And now we know why they are running. She pointed from the LLC tax returns to the BICE bank alert, then to the fraudulent will, and finally to the email about the San Paloma mission trip. The pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. They were not just running, they were cashing out. They were executing the final step, seizing Evelyn's entire estate, planning to dump the liquid assets into the untraceable BICE account, and using the mission trip as air cover for a one-way flight to a non-extradition country. It all made sense. The restraining order, the liar on my car, the email blast painting me as unstable. They were all countermeasures. They were all designed to provoke me, to make me scream and cry and act exactly like the hysterical victim they were painting me as. They wanted an emotional fight. I thought of the old man on the bus. Don't let them make you their story. No more, I said, my voice cold and quiet. Ava looked at me. No more arguing. No more defending my sanity, I said, turning to face the wall of evidence. They want an emotional fight. They are going to get a paper trail. We stop talking to the family. We stop reacting to the smear campaign. We are moving this from a family dispute to a federal case. We are going to talk to the IRS. The wall of evidence in Ava's living room was a monument to my family's betrayal. But it was also a chaotic, emotional mess. It was my story, to win. It needed to become their case file. My first stop was Harborview Legal Aid. I was broke. I had an eviction notice, and I was the subject of a restraining order. I qualified. Patricia Vale was a woman in her 50s who looked like she ran on burnt coffee and disciplined fury. Her office was a cramped cube smelling of dusty files and toner ink. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interruption, her eyes scanning the summary I had prepared. The local police will not touch this, she said, her voice flat. It was not a question. They see Cox versus Cox, and they close the file. The restraining order was smart. Your parents' move. It frames you as the aggressor and silences you legally. But the theft, I insisted. The $35,000 in fraudulent debt. Proving who entered the PIN is a nightmare, Patricia said, leaning back. They will say you gave it to them. Your mother will cry. Your father will look pious. It is a, he said, she said, in a system that hates domestic complications. Criminal is hard. Brooklyn, it is a high bar. She leaned forward. But civil is not, and tax fraud is not. The IRS does not care if your mother cries. Patricia agreed to take the case on a pro bono basis, focusing on the identity theft. Her first move was procedural. A barrage of paper. We drafted and sent a formal cease and desist letter to my parents' lawyer, demanding they stop all contact and immediately return the $12,000. We sent a second, separate letter demanding full repayment of the $35,000 in fraudulent debt, thereby establishing a formal civil dispute. The third set of letters went to the creditors, Harbor Federal, the department store, and Bayline Capital, the $20,000 personal loan. The responses were swift and brutal. Harbor Federal sent a form letter reiterating their position. PIN transaction, prior authorization, civil dispute. Bayline Capital was worse. Their fraud department sent a 2-page packet demanding definitive proof of the perpetrator's identity, including a police report that named the suspect. When I sent them the domestic incident report, they denied my claim within an hour. The system was designed to lock me in. A family member was the perfect culprit, because the system assumes the victim is complicit. The debt was mine. The local precinct is a dead end, Patricia advised, her voice tight with frustration after a failed call with a Harborview detective. The banks will not move without a real criminal file. The local cops will not open a criminal file because it is a family dispute. It is a perfect loop. You have to go up the ladder. You need to leapfrog them entirely. We need to talk to the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit, and we need to talk to the IRS. Ava, who had been listening on speakerphone, hung up and immediately dialed a new number. "I know a guy," she said. "He used to do fraud investigation for a major insurance carrier. Now he consults. He is retired, bored, and loves digging through trash." His name was Sam Worth. He showed up at Ava's apartment an hour later, looking more like a birdwatcher than a forensic investigator. He was in his late 60s, mild-mannered, and carried a worn leather briefcase. He stood in front of our wall of evidence for 10 solid minutes. He did not look at the photos of my parents or the emotional affidavits from my relatives. He just looked at the numbers. He studied the Schedule C filing for Blue Heron missions. He looked at the receipt for the $4,000 watch. $22,000 declared income, he mused, tapping the tax form. He then tapped the watch receipt. This single item is nearly 20% of their entire declared annual earnings. Amateurs, but greedy amateurs. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw someone who was not looking at me with pity. He was energized. "This is not a family dispute, Ms. Cox," Sam said, a small smile playing on his lips. "This is a structured criminal enterprise. You are not the only victim. The United States Treasury is a victim." That one sentence changed everything. Sam spent the next 2 days at Ava's dining table. He dug into the LLCs. He reviewed the timelines from Dylan, Riley, and Moira. He looked at the estimates from the Gables. "I have done a conservative cash flow analysis. Based on just the known donations and your parents' documented luxury expenditures over the last 7 years, he said, handing me a preliminary spreadsheet. "I can conservatively document a minimum of $160,000 in undeclared income. That is more than enough to trigger a full audit and an inquiry from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division." CI. Criminal investigation. The words had weight. This was no longer about a family betrayal. This was about federal crime. We gave the file a name, Project BOS 17. A quiet nod to the old man who told me to document, not argue. Our team had its roles. Sam, the forensic accountant, took the numbers. He built month-by-month cash flow charts. In one column, he listed the declared $22,000 income in black ink. In the parallel column, he listed their known expenses in red: the new car lease, the spa treatments, the watch, the travel. The red column dwarfed the black one. It was a visual confession. Ava, the data scientist, built the dashboard. She created a flowchart that visually tracked the money. "Telling the story with numbers," she called it, an arrow went from Mrs. Gable's bank account to Blue Heron missions. A thicker arrow went from Blue Heron to Cedar Pike LLC, and from Cedar Pike, a dozen smaller arrows pointed out Harborview Fine Timepieces, San Paloma Travel Agency, Mercedes-Benz Leasing. My job was the archivist and the visual expert. I took the raw data and made it impossible to ignore. I put the photos of the luxury goods next to the mission fund donation requests. The cognitive dissonance was damning. While they built the case, I built my defense. I had to disappear financially and professionally, and then reemerge, clean. First, I followed Sam's advice and became a ghost. I walked away from Harbor Federal. I went to a small, local credit union on the other side of town, one my parents had never heard of, and opened a new account with the last few $100s I had from a freelance check. I got a new phone number. The cheap prepaid phone became my only line of communication. I methodically set up new targeted alerts monitoring all public filings for Cedar Pike LLC and Blue Heron missions. Second, I had to fix my reputation. My parents had painted me as unstable. I could not look unstable. I scrubbed my old professional website. I relaunched under a new name, BCUR Visual Works. I needed to work. But my Harborview clients were poisoned, so I looked elsewhere. I found a small environmental nonprofit in the Gulfway region, 3 hours south. That was documenting coastal erosion. They had no money. I offered to do the job for free. Just for the credit. For 2 weeks. I drove Ava's car south and photographed dying marshlands. The work was stark, honest, and powerful. When the Gulfway Environmental Fund published the photo essay, it got picked up by a state news wire. I was not unstable Brooklyn Cox anymore. I was BCL Visual Works, documentary photographer. I was laundering my own reputation, and it was working. Most importantly, I was silent. I did not respond to the flying monkeys. The relatives who emailed me saying, "Your mother is heartbroken." I did not post a single thing on social media. I let the eviction notice hang on my old apartment door, which I had already vacated. I let the narrative of poor broken Brooklyn settle. I let them think they had won. The silence, it turned out, made them nervous. A week before the restraining order hearing, an email appeared. It was from Elaine. "Brooklyn, honey, this has all gone too far. My heart is broken into a million pieces. I know you are angry, but we are still family. Your father and I just want to talk. Can we please just meet for coffee? Just you and me. No lawyers, no anger. Let us just heal this family." I read the email to Sam and Patricia over the burner phone. "It is a trap," Sam said immediately. "They are nervous. They want to know what you know. They want to find out what you're planning before the hearing." "I know," I said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. She began. "Harborview is a one-party consent state." "Meaning what?" I asked. "Meaning," Patricia said, "as long as one party in the conversation knows it is being recorded, it is legal. As long as you know." I looked at Ava. She nodded. I replied to my mother. "I would like that." We set a time, the following Tuesday, a public cafe downtown, that weekend. I went to an electronics store. I did not buy a new camera. I bought a new silk scarf, a dark blue one with a thick textured weave, and I bought a digital audio recorder, no bigger than a paperclip, with a 48-hour battery life. I spent an evening practicing, nesting the tiny device in the folds of the fabric, right near my collarbone. It was invisible. My mother wanted a conversation. I was coming to take a statement. The cafe was public, bright, and smelled of burnt espresso. I was 10 minutes early. I sat in a booth facing the door. The blue silk scarf knotted loosely around my neck. I adjusted the fabric, ensuring the tiny microphone grill was clear. I felt its weight, a small, cold piece of metal against my collarbone. I was not there for reconciliation. I was there for a deposition. Elaine arrived exactly on time. She had dressed for the part of the heartbroken mother in a soft, dove-gray sweater and minimal makeup. Her eyes were already rimmed in red. A performance that, I realized, she could probably summon on command. She slid into the booth and immediately reached across the table, her hands grasping mine. Her skin was cold. "Oh, Brooklyn," she whispered, the tears welling instantly. "Honey, thank you for coming. This fighting is just killing me. It is tearing us all apart. We are family. Brooklyn, that is the only thing that matters." I let her hold my hands. I looked down, feigning shame. I had rehearsed this. I could not be the accuser. I had to be the penitent, confused daughter she wanted me to be. "I know, Mom," I said, my voice quiet. I think I just got overwhelmed with the studio and the money. Maybe I just overreacted. I have been under so much stress." The relief that washed over her face was visible, a physical relaxation of her shoulders. She had come here expecting a fight, and instead, I was handing her the narrative she had written for me. "Yes, honey," she said, squeezing my hands. "Exactly. That is what I told your father. You are just exhausted. You work so hard. Your father and I, we just want to help. We are always on your side. You know that." "I know," I said. I pulled my hands back slowly to lift my coffee cup. I worry about you guys, too. That mission trip to San Paloma sounds huge. It is a lot to manage, she brightened. Oh, it is. The Lord's work is so demanding, but it is such a blessing. So many people are counting on us. I took a sip. It must be complicated, planning something that big, especially the flights. I remember when I booked a trip to Europe. The tickets were a nightmare. I kept my voice casual. Are your tickets one way? You know, just in case the work takes longer than you expect. It was a calculated guess, based on the BICE account. People going on vacation book round trips. People fleeing do not. Elaine frowned. A flicker of confusion. The question was too specific. Oh, goodness, no. It is a multi-stop itinerary. Honey, very complicated. She was trying to brush it off. We go to San Paloma first, of course, for the ministry work, but then we have to visit some other donors in other countries. It is all a lot to manage. A multi-stop itinerary, not a mission, a route. I nodded, as if that made perfect sense. I looked down into my cup. I get it. It sounds international. That makes sense. I was so confused. Confused about what? Honey? I saw a registration alert, I said, making my voice small, almost childlike. The bank must have flagged it. The international banking. It must be very specialized. For the ministry. I had not even heard of a bank in Beas. The change was instantaneous. It was not a slow realization. It was a visceral, physical transformation. The soft, concerned mother vaporized. The blood drained from her face, leaving behind blotchy patches of purple anger. Her entire body went rigid. She leaned across the table, her voice no longer a maternal whisper but a low, guttural hiss. What did you say? I just said, I saw the bank name, Beas, I stammered, widening my eyes. You have been spying on us. She did not shout, but her whisper was sharper than a yell. Her hand slammed flat on the table, rattling the cups. The few other patrons in the cafe looked over. You are checking our bank accounts. What else have you been doing? That is illegal. Brooklyn? That is harassment. Got it. She had not said. What is BICE? She had not said. We do not bank there. She confirmed its existence by defending it. She had admitted, on tape, that they had a hidden, offshore account that I was not supposed to know about. I leaned back, performing the role of the cowed daughter perfectly. No, Mom. No, I was not spying. I swear. I got a letter. What letter? She snapped, her eyes narrowing. She was in damage control mode now. It looked like a tax form. It came to my old apartment. I think it was misdelivered. It was addressed to Cedar Pike, LLC, at the house. Give it to me. I did not keep it, I said, trying to make my voice sound panicked. It looked like junk mail, but it said Internal Revenue Service. Something about an audit notification. It said they were reviewing all the LLC filings, and that an official notice would be sent within 30 to 60 days. I got scared. I was worried. Mom, I did not know if I should throw it away. The checkmate. Elaine went absolutely white. The blotchy anger was gone, replaced by a pale, waxy terror. The blood had left her face entirely. She looked, in that moment, like a corpse. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, but no sound came out. The IRS was not a family dispute. It was a federal agency. She did not say another word. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping so loudly on the tile floor that the barista winced. She fumbled for her purse, her hands shaking. I have to go, she muttered, not to me, but to the air. She turned and walked out of the cafe, moving stiffly, like someone in shock. I sat there for a full minute, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached up and touched the silk scarf. The tiny red indicator light, hidden in the weave, was still blinking. I carefully pressed the button, saving the file. I drove back to Ava's, the adrenaline making my hands shake on the steering wheel. I plugged the recorder into the laptop, Sam, Ava, and I listened in silence. When my mother's voice hissed, "You have been spying on us," Sam just closed his eyes and nodded. "That is it," he said quietly. "That is the consciousness of guilt, and the IRS bluff brilliant. It was a panic button." "Now we watch," Ava said. Turning to her own monitor, she had our network of alerts active. We did not have to wait long. The cafe meeting ended at 10:30 in the morning. At 11:15, Ava's screen flashed. "We have movement. Greg Cox. Hard inquiry logged on his IRA. He is checking the penalty for early withdrawal," Sam said. "He is liquidating." At 11:40, another alert. Elaine Cox. New seller registration, Harborview Luxury Exchange. Listing posted, men's chronograph watch, like new, box and papers. "She is selling the evidence," I whispered, astonished at the blatant, stupid panic. At 12:30, a different kind of ping, a geodata alert Ava had tied to their phones. Elaine Cox, location Harborview Federal, main branch, the one with the safe deposit boxes. "She is getting the cash," Sam said, standing up. "They are going to run. Ava, check the flights." Ava's fingers flew. "The San Paloma tickets are still there. Wait, they just paid a $500 cancellation fee. They are canceling San Paloma." "And," Sam pressed, "and here it is. New booking, 2 one-way tickets, Harborview International to Miami, connecting to Bice International, 9 days from now." The room went silent. We had a hard deadline. 9 days until they emptied my grandmother's accounts, took the $200,000, and disappeared into a legal black hole. "Now we move," Sam said, grabbing his briefcase. "I am transmitting the full data packet and this audio file to my contacts at IRSCI and the State Financial Crimes Unit. The audio, combined with the flight itinerary, elevates this from review to immediate flight risk. They will act." I turned to my own laptop. The IRS was slow. The state was slow. I needed to move faster. I needed to take back my name. For the next 8 hours, I worked. I was not a victim. I was a publisher. I was a photo archivist. I was building the honor packet. I designed it as a simple, visual, devastating PDF. It was not a legal brief. It was a story, told in receipts. Page 1. My mother's email. "Brooklyn is having a severe mental health crisis." Page 2. My bank statement. Negative $12,000. Page 3. The watch receipt. $4,180. Page 4. The LLC tax filing. $22,000 declared income. Page 5. The affidavits. Aunt Moira's paranoia. The Gables missing mission funds. Dylan's ungrateful loan. Page 6. The fraudulent will. Disinheriting me and Riley. Page 7. The confirmed. One-way flight itinerary to Bice. I finalized the distribution list. The IRSCI. The State Attorney General. The full board of directors at Harborview Community Chapel. Every family member on my mother's original prayer email. And every victim in the Recovery Ledger group. There was one name left, the Harborview Police. "You cannot go to the chief," Sam warned. "Greg's golfing buddy." "I am not going to the chief," I said. "I am going around him." I called the main precinct line. "I need to speak to Detective Morgan. Financial crimes. It is regarding case file 941DR. Detective Morgan had a reputation. Ambitious, overworked, and zero tolerance for incompetence. She took the call. "I know your case, Ms. Cox. It is a domestic dispute." I told Officer. "It is not a domestic dispute," I said, my voice cold and flat, cutting her off. "It is a multi-state financial fraud enterprise with documented identity theft, elder abuse, and tax evasion. I have confirmed one-way flight itineraries for the suspects to a non-extradition country in 9 days. I will be at your office in 20 minutes with a forensic accounting consultant." I hung up. We sat in her office, a glass-walled cube, me and Sam. Morgan looked furious at being summoned. "This is highly irregular. Ms. Cox, I have 2 minutes before I'm in a briefing. I did not speak. I slid a single, unadorned USB drive across her desk. This is not a dispute, I said. This is a balance sheet. Sam leaned forward. Detective, my name is Sam Worth. I am a retired fraud investigator. On that drive, you will find a full forensic analysis of 2 fraudulent LLCs, Cedar Pike and Blue Heron. You will find documented undeclared income conservatively estimated at $160,000. You will find bank fraud, multiple counts of identity theft, and a pending case of elder financial abuse against an 80-year-old woman in Rosemar Court. You will also find a legally recorded audio file where the suspect, Elaine Cox, confirms the existence of an offshore account in Bice. And finally, you will find the one-way flight itineraries for 9 days from now. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. The IRS CI Division and the State AG's office received this identical packet 1 hour ago. They are moving on it as a flight risk. We watched her face. This was the moment. She was a career cop. She could ignore this and let the state and feds take a high-profile case, making her precinct look incompetent, or she could seize it. She was realizing that the risk of inaction letting the chief's friends flee the country was suddenly far greater to her own career than the risk of action. She picked up the USB. She stared at it. She looked at Sam. Worth, you are the one who built this. I organized the data for the IRS. Yes. Her eyes narrowed. She stood up. Wait here. She was gone for 10 minutes, an agonizing 10 minutes where I just stared at the wall. My burner phone buzzed, a text from Ava. 9 days. Detective Morgan walked back in. She was holding a printout of the Bice flight itinerary. I am petitioning a judge for an emergency asset freeze based on the documented flight risk, she said, her voice all business. And I am requesting immediate warrants for the safe deposit box in their home, based on the evidence of money laundering. This is no longer a domestic incident, Ms. Cox. This is an active financial crimes investigation. Sam looked at me. He did not smile. He just mouthed a number. 72 hours. At exactly 10 o'clock on Friday morning, I pressed send. It was not an emotional letter. It was not a plea for understanding. It was a data packet, a meticulously organized PDF, sent from a new, secure email address. The subject line was cold, sterile, and professional. Cedar Pike Blue Heron cash flow tax filings. The distribution list was the weapon. It went to the contacts Sam had provided at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and the State Attorney General's office. It went to Detective Morgan. It went to the entire 9-person board of directors at the Harborview Community Chapel, including their legal counsel. And it went to every single relative and church member on my mother's original Prayers for Brooklyn email blast. The payload was my honor packet, the story I had assembled as an archivist. They opened the file. Page 1. My mother's email. Brooklyn is suffering from a severe mental health crisis. Page 2. The high-resolution photograph of the word liar spray-painted across my windshield. Page 3. A side-by-side comparison. On the left, a screenshot of a text from Elaine asking the Gables for a $5,000 special mission donation. On the right, the receipt for the $4,180 watch, dated 2 days later. The subsequent pages laid out the rest of the map, the timeline of the fraudulent $35,000 debt, the IRS Schedule C filing declaring $22,000 in annual income, the affidavits from Aunt Moira and Dylan, the photo of the fraudulent will disinheriting the grandchildren, and the final, damning page, the audio transcript from the cafe. Culminating in, "You have been spying on us," followed by the confirmed one-way flight itinerary to Bice. I had countered her narrative of my instability with an organized, verifiable, and terrifying paper trail. We did not have to wait for the results. Ava's digital dashboard, monitoring their communications, lit up like a Christmas tree. 10:02, Ava announced, watching the real-time data. Aunt Moira just forwarded the PDF to Elaine. The text just says, "What is this? Elaine? It says you stole Don's funeral money. 10:03. A board member from the church just emailed Greg. Mr. Cox, do not contact the office. We are convening an emergency meeting at 11 a.m. 10:05. Greg Cox is calling his lawyer. Bernard. Ava watched the call log. Call duration 90 seconds. He hung up. He is calling the office administrator now. Why? I asked, pacing the living room. Because, Ava said, her eyes wide as she cross-referenced another alert. Detective Morgan's asset freeze, the one she petitioned for yesterday based on the flight risk, was approved by Judge Kwan at 9:30 this morning. All accounts tied to Greg, Elaine, Cedar Pike, and Blue Heron are frozen. The retainer Greg has with his lawyer, the bank just declined the charge. The first pillar had fallen. They were trapped. My mother's reaction was exactly what I had expected, public and hysterical. A post appeared on her Facebook page at 10:30. Our daughter Brooklyn has fallen in with a terrible group. She is mentally ill and has created forged documents to try and destroy her father and me. We are the victims of a vicious slander campaign. Please pray for her. She is truly lost. But the narrative was no longer hers to control. The comment section filled up, but not with the sympathy she expected. The first comment was from Aunt Moira. Elaine, stop saying I am paranoid. I have the bank statements. Where is Don's $14,000? The second was from my sister, Riley. Then why did you try to steal Grandma Evelyn's will? And where is my $9,400 from the wedding? The digital walls were closing in. At 11:15, the Harborview Community Chapel Board meeting concluded. An email was sent to the entire congregation. The board had voted unanimously to suspend Greg and Elaine Cox from all financial and ministerial duties. Effective immediately, they had also voted to hire an independent forensic auditor to review the last 5 years of the Mission Fund, the church's former treasurer, a quiet man Greg had pushed out 3 years ago. Replied to the group, "It is about time. I have had concerns for years about the Blue Heron account and the lack of receipts. The social structure that had protected them, the one they had built on piety and charisma, was dissolving in real time. At noon, Patricia Vale, my legal aid lawyer, forwarded me 2 new documents. The Gables, the elderly couple, had gone to their own bank, retrieved their statements, and with their son, had filed a notarized affidavit alleging financial abuse. They were no longer confused, they were witnesses. A small, sharp ping from my personal email. It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord from the Pier Quarter studio. Ms. Cox, I was included on an email from your aunt this morning. I have read the attached PDF. I am appalled. I deeply apologize for my misunderstanding of your situation. I was wrong. The studio space is, in fact, still available. If you are still interested, I would be happy to discuss a new payment plan. It was the first time in weeks someone had apologized to me. I sat down. The relief so sudden it made my knees weak. By 3 p.m, the local media had it. An investigative reporter at the Harborview Gazette, who had been on the chapel's email list, ran the first story on their website. The headline was cautious but devastating. Prominent Harborview ministry leaders accused of financial abuse network. The story mentioned the allegations of elder abuse, the widespread family loans, and critically, suspected offshore transfers to B's. The media attention was the final piece Detective Morgan needed. Armed with the affidavits, the financial dashboard from Sam, the media pressure, and the undeniable flight risk. She had no trouble getting her warrant signed. Not just the asset freeze, she now had a full, no-knock search warrant for my parents' home, their safe deposit box, and their person. Greg's golfing buddy, the police chief, could not stop it. The case was too public, the evidence too clean. He is panicking, Ava said, pointing to her screen. It was late afternoon. What is it? Greg, he is not calling his lawyer. He is calling Captain Matthews' personal cell phone. His friend at the precinct, I said, the same man I had been warned about. Yes, Ava said, a grim smile on her face. But here's the beauty of it. All calls to a registered police mobile device, even a personal one, are logged in the metadata. He just created a time-stamped, official record of himself attempting to interfere with an active investigation by contacting a superior officer. Sam is forwarding this log directly to the state AG's office. While the public storm was raging, Patricia Vale had been busy. She had spent the afternoon in probate court with Evelyn's file. She presented the judge with the fraudulent will, the buy's flight itinerary, and the affidavits. The judge's action was swift. An emergency protective order was issued for Evelyn Keaton. Her assets were frozen, but not by Morgan's order. They were frozen against Greg and Elaine. The court immediately invalidated the updated will, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. A temporary guardian, a neutral third-party lawyer, was assigned to manage Evelyn's affairs. She was safe. That evening, I left Ava's apartment. My burner phone was buzzing with texts. Cousins, aunts, old friends, some offering apologies, others demanding I stop tearing the family apart. I powered it off and put it in my pocket. I walked to the bus stop on the corner. It was 5:30 in the evening, almost the same time I had stood on that corner weeks ago. My life in ashes. The number 17 bus arrived. Hissing, I got on. I did not need to. I could have stayed at Ava's. I did it because it was a ritual. I sat in one of the hard plastic seats as the bus pulled away from the curb, retracing the same route I had taken to their house. The printed bank statements clutched in my hand. The bag I was carrying was not empty this time. It held the burner phone, the receipt for the digital audio recorder, and a copy of the search warrants. I looked out the window as the bus rumbled through the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. We passed the police precinct, where I knew Morgan was preparing her team. We passed Harborview Federal, where my money had been stolen, and where men with drills would be opening their safe deposit box in the morning. The storm I had unleashed was moving. The machinery of consequences was grinding, and it was no longer my job to push it. All I had to do was let it work. I was just waiting for the final accounting. The raid did not happen with sirens. It was quiet, surgical, and timed for 6 in the morning. Just as the neighborhood was waking up, Detective Morgan, 3 other plainclothes officers, and a state-level financial crimes investigator served the warrant. I was not there. Ava had me stay at her apartment, monitoring the feeds. We saw it through the Ring doorbell camera of a sympathetic neighbor, a feed that was routed to Ava's laptop. We watched as my father, Greg, opened the door in his new silk robe. We watched the color drain from his face as Morgan handed him the papers. We watched as my mother, Elaine, appeared behind him, her face puffy from sleep, her eyes darting between the officers like a cornered animal. They were allowed to sit on their own sofa while the team, methodical and silent, dismantled their lives. They took the new laptops. They took the desktop computer from my father's study. They took the file folders, the checkbooks, and the desktop printer my mother used to create her fake Mission Fund receipts. They took the brand new, heavy-duty paper shredder that was still in its box, and they took a shoebox from my father's closet labeled backup cards, which contained, according to the inventory list Morgan filed later, 3 unactivated credit cards in my name and 2 in my grandmother's. Ava watched the data feed from their router, which the investigators had tapped. "He is trying," she muttered, pointing to the screen. "He just initiated a remote wipe command for his cloud backup. Will it work?" I asked, my stomach tight. "No," Ava said, clicking a different window. "Sam and I pulled a full forensic image of that cloud drive 48 hours ago. The second he booked the BICE tickets, we have the before picture. All he's doing right now is creating a data log of destruction of evidence. He just committed another felony." The neighbors stood on their lawns, coffee mugs in hand, watching the scene. These were the people who had received my mother's prayers for Brooklyn email. They had watched Greg and Elaine walk to church every Sunday. The picture of piety and success. Now, they watched as investigators carried out boxes labeled financial evidence. No one spoke. The silence was its own verdict. The social unmasking was as swift as the legal one. At 11 a.m., the Harborview Community Chapel's Board of Directors, having received my PDF and the news of the raid, released their official statement. It was brutal. Elaine Cox was not just suspended. She was permanently removed from all lay leadership and any role involving finances. The Blue Heron missions and San Paloma funds were declared void. The board, to save itself from liability, publicly requested that Greg and Elaine provide 5 full years of unredacted bank statements for both LLCs to the forensic auditor they had just hired. It was a request they knew could not be met. The pieces in the Project Bus 17 file were now being confirmed, one, by official sources. Sam Worth, working with the state investigator, had no trouble linking the cash flow. The withdrawals from the Cedar Pike LLC account in the last 2 weeks, totaling over $50,000, matched perfectly with the wire transfer confirmation codes to the Buys International Bank. And the payments for the Buys flight tickets had come from the same account. The ministry was not just a cover, it was the getaway vehicle. The tax fraud was even more blatant. The investigators pulled the full filings for both LLCs. My parents had filed negative tax returns for the last 3 years, claiming that mission-related expenses exceeded their donations. The investigators simply laid the expense reports next to the credit card statements. Mission-related expense $4,180 on the tax form matched the charge from Harborview Fine Timepieces. Mission-related expense $3,200 matched a charge for Elaine Cox Spa Wellness Retreat. They had not just committed fraud, they had itemized it. But it was Detective Morgan who found the linchpin. She had the stack of fraudulent credit card applications that had been opened in my name, the $20,000 Bayline Capital loan, the department store cards. My signature was on all of them. Morgan, however, also had the high-resolution photographs I had taken of the fraudulent will my father tried to make Evelyn sign. She was not a handwriting expert, but she did not need to be. The signature Brooklyn Cox on the Bayline Capital loan application was forged, and the signature Greg Cox as the witness on Evelyn's fraudulent will. They were a near-perfect match in style, pressure, and the distinctive loop of the G. Greg had forged my name, and in his arrogance, he had used the same handwriting style he used for his own signature. He had tied himself to both the identity theft against me and the elder abuse against his mother with the same pen. With that evidence, the corporate wall broke. Bayline Capital, the lender for the $20,000 loan, was suddenly facing a civil liability lawsuit for predatory lending and for violating Know Your Customer laws. They had issued a loan without ever speaking to me or verifying my identity. The phone call from their lawyer to Patricia Vale was short. They were no longer denying my claim. They were now fully cooperating with the State Attorney General's investigation as a victim of Greg Cox's fraud. They were canceling the debt. They were removing it from my credit report, effective immediately. They were reversing all interest and fees. They were doing everything possible to avoid being named as a co-defendant. Harbor Federal followed suit within the hour. The $12,000 was provisionally credited back to my new account at the credit union, pending the criminal trial. The card-present, PIN-correct argument had evaporated in the face of wire fraud and money laundering charges. Greg and Elaine were summoned for an emergency arraignment. Their lawyer, Bernard, the one Greg had tried to call, finally showed up after a family member posted his bond. His advice to them was simple and desperate. Say nothing. Do not speak to anyone. Do not post anything. Do not leave your house. Greg understood. He was a calculator. He was silent. But my mother, Elaine, could not be silent. Silence was not her tool. Her power lay in her narrative, in her performance of the victim. Being told to be quiet was like being told not to breathe. That night, she defied her lawyer. She went on Facebook. The post was a masterpiece of narcissistic self-pity. It was a photo of her and Greg on their mission trip, smiling with children in a village. "This is who we are," she wrote. "We are givers. We are helpers. We serve the Lord. Now, our lives are being destroyed by a hateful, jealous daughter who has always been unstable. She has poisoned our family and our church. These lies are breaking us. We have lost everything because of her slander. Please, if you have ever believed in us, pray for us now. We are the victims here." I looked at the post. Sitting in Ava's living room, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just quiet. Ava simply hit print screen. "Time stamped," she said, saving the file. "She just violated the terms of the restraining order by contacting you, albeit indirectly, and she just provided the prosecution with a beautiful piece of evidence showing a pattern of public manipulation and an attempt to tamper with the jury pool." I did not reply to the post. I did not text my relatives. I did not call my aunt. I did not make a single statement to the Harborview Gazette, which had been calling my burner phone all day. My parents had built their world on words, on sermons, on whispers, on charm, and on lies. They had used words to paint me as unstable, ungrateful, and crazy. I had my own language. I had the bank statements. I had the wire transfer confirmations. I had the tax filings. I had the forensic images. I had the audio recording. I had the receipts. I let the paper do the talking. The unmasking was complete. The machinery was moving toward a trial. Every lie had been exposed. Every asset frozen. Every escape route cut off. The perfect couple was trapped. Their reputation shattered. Their finances in ruins. I should have felt victorious. But as I looked at the complete Project Bus 17 file, the entire case laid out from start to finish, one piece still felt wrong. I had been pushed to the brink of financial ruin, and in my desperation, I had built this case, but what had started it? The timeline. The fraudulent credit cards were opened 3 weeks before my account was drained. The Buys account was opened 2 weeks before. They were already planning their exit. Draining my savings account was just the final, greedy cash grab. It was not my confrontation that started this. I had not triggered their panic. Someone else had. Someone had put pressure on them before I ever knew what was happening. Someone had lit the match that forced them to accelerate their plan, forcing them to get sloppy, to get caught. Who had really set these dominoes in motion? The Harborview County Courthouse was not the grand, wood-paneled cathedral of justice you see in movies. It was a modern, low-ceilinged building that smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale coffee. This was not the criminal trial. That was still being built by the state AG's office. This was the emergency hearing to determine if Detective Morgan's temporary asset freeze should be made permanent, and to formally ratify the emergency protective order over my grandmother. Evelyn, my parents were already there. They sat at the respondents' table, flanked by their lawyer, Bernard. They looked collapsed. All the righteous indignation, the pastoral charm, the tearful performances, it was all gone. Greg, my father, was a shade of gray I had never seen before, his suit hanging on him. He stared at the wall ahead. Elaine, my mother, was huddled in her chair, her face puffy and raw. She was staring at her own hands, twisting a tissue. I sat with Patricia Vale. I felt strangely calm. My work was done. The spreadsheets, the audio file, the affidavits, the photographs. It was all in the judge's file. This was just the formality. The gavel fall. I let my eyes drift to the gallery behind them. It was mostly empty. A single reporter from the Gazette, a few law students, and in the last row, near the door, sat the old man from the bus. My heart seemed to stop. I stared. It was him. The same worn, pilled wool coat, the same quiet posture. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the judge's bench. His expression calm, patient. I felt a chill. What was he doing here? His presence felt like a physical impossibility, a dream overlapping with reality. I could not make it make sense. The judge entered, a sharp-faced woman named Kwan. We rose and sat. She put on her glasses and looked down at the thick file. "I have reviewed the motions before me," Judge Kwan said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The motion for a comprehensive asset freeze on Gregory Cox, Elaine Cox, and the corporate entities Cedar Pike and Blue Heron. I have also reviewed the emergency petition for the protection of Evelyn Keaton, The evidence provided, particularly regarding the flight risk and the allegations of elder financial abuse, is substantial. Bernard, my parents' lawyer, leaped to his feet. He was sweating. Your Honor, this is a procedural ambush. It is a gross overreach based on the coordinated slander of an unstable daughter and her accomplices. This is a family dispute, nothing more. My clients have been libeled, their assets frozen without due process. Before he could continue, the courtroom clerk, a thin, quiet woman, hurried up to the bench and whispered to the judge. Judge Kwan's eyebrows shot up. She looked past my parents, into the gallery. Mr. Hale, the judge called out. The clerk informs me you wish to address the court as an interested party. The name meant nothing to me, but my mother's head snapped up. She turned. Her eyes locked on the old man in the back row. Elaine made a sound. It was not a word. It was a small, high-pitched noise, like a kettle boiling dry. The color, what little she had, drained from her face. She looked, in that one instant, absolutely terrified. The old man stood up. He walked forward, his steps making no sound on the thin carpet. He stopped in front of the bench. Arthur Hale, Your Honor, he said. His voice was exactly as I remembered it, a low, warm, steady rumble. I am here on behalf of the Hale Family Trust, and I am here as the maternal grandfather of Brooklyn Cox. The air left my lungs. Maternal grandfather, my mother's father, the man I had been told was dead, the man my mother claimed had abandoned her, the source of 1,000 of her stories of victimhood. Greg was staring at him now, his mouth slightly open. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Mr. Hale, the judge said, her voice cautious. That is a significant claim. It is, Your Honor, Arthur Hale said, still facing the bench. I have spent the last 25 years at a remove from my daughter, Elaine, and her husband, a distance I was forced to establish in 1998, after I discovered Mr. Cox attempting to siphon funds from my company's employee pension fund. Bernard was on his feet again, sputtering. Objection relevance. This is prejudicial. Unsubstantiated slander from... It is context, Counselor, Judge Kwan said, her voice like ice. And given the nature of the allegations before me, I am finding it highly relevant. Sit down. Bernard sat. Please continue. Miss Hale, the judge said. Arthur nodded. To my regret, I am a wealthy man. My business is the Hale Foundry Group. That wealth has been a target for Mr. and Mrs. Cox for decades. I removed myself to protect my assets, but I never stopped monitoring the well-being of my granddaughters, Riley and Brooklyn. Hale Foundry. The name was on half the industrial buildings in the state. This man, who wore a $20 coat and rode the city bus. I prefer a simple life, Your Honor, he said, as if sensing the question in the room. It allows one to observe. I have been aware of my granddaughter Brooklyn for some time. I have watched her build her photography business from nothing. I have, on occasion, ridden the number 17 bus. It is a very clarifying way to see the city. He was looking at me now. I was sitting next to Ms. Cox on the morning of May 14th, the morning she discovered her life savings had been stolen. I watched her. She was in shock, but she was not hysterical. She was holding a stack of bank statements. She was already collecting the paper. I watched her build the very case file that is sitting on your desk. Your Honor. I watched her choose documentation over drama. He turned back to the judge and placed a thin, leather-bound portfolio on the clerk's desk. This is the Hale Family Trust. It contains a specific provision for my granddaughters. A character clause. I wrote it 25 years ago, specifically with Mr. and Mrs. Cox in mind. It states that the principal of the trust is to be released to the beneficiaries only when they can demonstrate, and I quote, provable integrity and moral resilience in the face of direct familial fraud. He let the words hang in the air. My granddaughter, he said, has, through this terrible ordeal, met and exceeded the conditions of the trust. I am here today to formally activate her inheritance, But I'm also here to provide the corroborating evidence that you are missing. He handed over a second, thicker file. This, he said, is my own file on Gregory Cox, dating back to 1999. It includes his attempts to gain power of attorney over my own accounts. It includes a string of emails from him, as recently as 2015, begging for investment capital for his mission fund, which I tracked and found he was attempting to divert to a personal account. He has been trying to get my money for my entire life. When he finally realized I was a locked door, he went after his wife's mother, Evelyn Keaton, and when he grew impatient with her, he went after his own daughter. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place, the BICE account, the hurried, sloppy fraud. They were not just running from me, they were running from him. He had been putting legal pressure on them for months, and I had been the final, collateral damage of their panic. Finally, Your Honor, Arthur said, placing one more document down. This is a sworn affidavit. It details at least 4 instances in the last 5 years where Mr. and Mrs. Cox have actively used my name, the Hale name, to solicit charitable donations from members of the Harborview business community. Donations that were deposited directly into the Cedar Pike LLC. They were not just stealing from family, they were committing wire fraud using my identity. He finished. He stood there, a quiet man in a wool coat who had just systematically dismantled their entire defense. Arthur Hale turned. He walked back to my table and paused. He leaned down, so only Patricia and I could hear. I sat next to you on that bus. Brooklyn, he whispered, his eyes kind. I gave you that pass. I told you not to let them make you their story. I had to see which narrative you would choose. Theirs, the hysterical, broken, emotional victim they were trying to create, or yours, the one written on paper. You chose yours, and you did not disappoint me. He nodded, then walked back to his seat in the gallery and sat down. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Elaine was rocking back and forth, making a low, keening sound. Greg was rigid, his face ashen. Bernard, their lawyer, was pale. He looked at his stack of papers, then back at the judge. He slowly, deliberately, sat down. He had nothing left to say. Judge Kwan looked at the new files. She looked at Greg and Elaine. She looked at Arthur Hale. Then she looked at me. Mr. Bernard, she said, her voice sharp as glass. Given this new testimony, which corroborates a multi-decade pattern of systematic fraud, and given the now overwhelming evidence of identity theft, elder financial abuse, and extreme flight risk, the court finds sufficient, indeed overwhelming, grounds. She lifted her gavel. The temporary asset freeze on all accounts, domestic and international, held by Gregory Cox, Elaine Cox, Cedar Pike LLC, and Blue Heron Missions, is hereby made total, comprehensive, and permanent pending the outcome of the criminal trial. The protective order for Evelyn Keaton is ratified, and I am issuing an immediate no-fly order for both respondents, Mr. and Mrs. Cox. You will surrender your passports to this court by 5 p.m. today. The gavel cracked down. It was done. The day they were scheduled to fly to BICE dawned clear and cold. At 9:58 in the morning, just 2 hours before their flight, Detective Morgan, backed by 2 state attorney general's investigators, bypassed the bail process entirely. Armed with the evidence from Arthur Hale and the now undeniable proof of their intent to flee, a judge signed the emergency arrest warrants. A separate, supplemental warrant was signed to drill the safe deposit box at Harborview Federal. They never even made it to the security line. Detective Morgan intercepted them at the departure gate for the Miami flight. They were standing there, holding their carry-on luggage, their faces pale and tight. They had surrendered their passports to the court as ordered, but in their arrogance, they had applied for emergency replacements, claiming the originals were lost. The system had flagged them instantly. Morgan just walked up, held out the warrants, and said, Gregory and Elaine Cox, you are under arrest. Their real valid passports were found in Greg's briefcase, a final, foolish lie. They were in an arraignment room by 3 that afternoon, wearing paper jumpsuits, the state's prosecutor, a sharp woman who looked even more tired than Patricia Vale, unrolled the initial charges. It was a cascade of felonies: conspiracy to commit bank fraud, identity theft, aggravated identity theft against a person over 65, 7 counts of tax evasion, conspiracy to launder money. While they were being read their rights, my new email inbox, the one tied to my Clean Credit Union account, was lighting up. First, an email from the legal department at Bayline Capital. Dear Ms. Cox, in light of the criminal investigation, we have signed a formal restitution agreement. The fraudulent loan of $20,000 has been voided. All negative reports to the credit bureaus have been expunged. Second, an email from Harbor Federal. We have reached an agreement with the state AG's office. The $12,431.82 has been confirmed as a fraudulent withdrawal. The funds have been permanently restored. The financial pillars they had kicked out from under me were being rebuilt, one by one, by the very institutions that had dismissed me. The final social pillar collapsed the same afternoon. The Harborview Community Chapel released the findings of its forensic audit. It was devastating. The Blue Heron Missions Fund was a legal fiction, a shell. The audit confirmed that over 80% of the donations were funneled directly to the Cedar Pike LLC. Elaine's meticulous, self-printed receipt book, the one she used to charm the Gables, did not match a single point-of-sale transaction. It was, the audit concluded, a deliberate and sustained act of sophisticated financial deception. In probate court, the final nail was hammered in. The judge, citing the criminal charges, permanently voided the fraudulent will my father had tried to force on Evelyn. An independent guardian was appointed, a professional fiduciary who answered only to the court, to manage her estate and ensure her protection. She was free of them. My grandfather, Arthur, met me in Patricia Vale's small office. He did not come with sympathy. He came with tools. The trust is yours, he said simply, placing a portfolio on the desk. But it is not a windfall. It is a foundation. He had set up a team for me, a civil asset recovery lawyer, to begin the process of clawing back any money that had made it to BICE, and a trust manager. There is a matching grant provision, Arthur explained, tapping the file. For your studio, you secure a lease, you present a transparent business plan, and the trust will match, dollar for dollar, your first year of operating costs. You earned it. Now build it. I had one last piece of evidence to file. I had spent the weekend in my new, temporary darkroom, processing the images. I submitted my final packet to the prosecutor's office. I called it Proof of Hands. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a photo essay. On the left, a scan of a mission donation check from Aunt Moira. On the right, a high-resolution photograph of the luxury item purchased that same week. The check for Don's funeral fund, next to the hotel bill from the pastoral retreat in Napa. The Gables missions checks, juxtaposed against the lease payments for the new car. It was the story, told in my language. At the bail hearing, Greg's lawyer, Bernard, looked exhausted. Your Honor, my clients are pillars of their community. They are not a flight risk. They surrendered their passports. They have every intention of fighting these absurd charges. The prosecutor did not even raise her voice. Your Honor, she said, the state submits the following. Exhibit A2 confirmed. One-way tickets to BICE, a non-extradition country, purchased under a false pretense. Exhibit B wire transfer receipts to an offshore account in BICE, totaling over $50,000. Exhibit C, recorded communications with an international property broker in BICE. And Exhibit D, the 2 lost passports they were arrested with this morning at the airport. The state asserts that Mr. and Mrs. Cox are not only a flight risk, they were in the process of fleeing. The judge looked at Greg. Mr. Cox, do you have anything to say? Greg stood. The mask was gone. There was no charm, no pastoral authority, just a hollowed-out, desperate man. It was a misunderstanding, he whispered. Bail is denied, the judge said. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was small, metallic, and final. 2 officers flanked them. Greg stared at the floor. But Elaine turned. She looked back. Searching the gallery, she looked right at me. I had expected to see tears. I had expected the performance, but there was nothing. Her eyes were not sad. They were not angry. They were just empty. The performer had left the stage. I stood up and walked out of the courtroom. I did not look back. I stood in the courthouse hallway, the smell of disinfectant sharp in my nose. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 weeks. It came out as a ragged, shaking sigh. My legs felt weak. My cheap burner phone, the one I still carried, vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email alert from my new credit union. Notification. A deposit of $12,431.82 has been initiated. I stared at the numbers. I walked out of the courthouse, pushing through the heavy glass doors into the bright, cold afternoon. A city bus was pulling away from the curb, hissing as it went. The number 17. Arthur was standing by the curb, his wool coat buttoned against the wind. He was not looking at me. He was watching the bus disappear down the street. He must have heard me stop. He turned. "You chose paper, not noise," he said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the traffic. "They wanted a screaming match. You gave them a balance sheet. That is why today, the story is well and truly yours." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let me know, and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and if you want to support more stories like this one, hit that hype button so more people can hear it.